Verosia, thank you very much for welcoming us into your home.
Thank you. I'm humbled that
yes.
you came.
So we're here basically just to, hear you talk about how you feel you should remember, or how you remember your father, who was once president of this country. Would like you first of all to start by sharing with us the early memories when you were younger, with your father as president. What are some of the earliest memories that you remember?
So obviously when he became president, I was still quite young.
How old were you?
I should have been around 4 or 5 when he became president. Pretty sure I was about 4. So even then it was more, it didn't really kick in, if you know what I mean. It was more like this is what life was, until obviously throughout the years you come to understand exactly what it is that you're living.
Did you know that you're the president's daughter?
That would probably when I turned about 12, 13, probably even earlier, like 10. And you start to notice that there's always people around you when you're traveling. There's a certain etiquette that you have to follow. There's certain behavioral aspects that you have to maintain. And that's when it started to sink in that, oh, this is not that ordinary. So, but for me, it was always more so of a learning experience, because for me, my father was a great, not just a father of the nation, but he was also a great individual on his own as a person. He was an avid lover of books. He was a great sports fan, soccer especially. And he was most importantly, predominantly a great man of God. And that's one of the things that I remember the most, because as a family, collectively, we used to pray a lot, even before he became president. We had like midnight prayers where he would wake everyone, he would round everyone up. It's time to pray, it's time to pray. Praise and worship. So it was instilled in us even before he became president. And once he became president, it escalated, and it actually grew. Like the amount of prayer, the amount of togetherness developed stronger and stronger. And he made sure that we understood the word, and we understood the importance of having God in our lives. And that's one thing that I don't think any of us will forget or can forget.
But on the other side, was he a disciplinarian, or was he an easygoing parent? You could get whatever you wanted. What sort of a parent was he? Or who was the disciplinarian between him and mom?
I think, in my opinion, they were both very diplomatic. Yes, in the way that they approached how they disciplined us. Dad was more so of a spoken person. So if you did something wrong, first of all, he would call you by your first name, which was unusual, because usually Dad always called us by the nicknames that he gave us. So throughout our lives, I was always Vana Mwape, my sister was Vana Blasto, others were Vayama or Nkandu, and these are all names that he gave us according to his aunts and uncles. So his mother's sister or his mother's brother, we were always named after them. So if he called you, for example, Verosia, you knew that time's up. It's time now. And he would sit you down away from everyone else and actually talk to you and first hear what you had to say and explain his point of view and why what you did was wrong and how you can improve on yourself. So it wasn't so much of a you're wrong and this is how you have to behave. It was more so of how do we make this situation better. So he was always looking to improve on our characters rather than tear us down. Yeah.
What are some of the things that he valued the most that you would remember? I know you said that you were, young, but even just during the years in his life, even after he became president, what are some of the things that he really valued most, that that this was what my father valued?
Primarily, as of course, as I said earlier, Jehovah God. That was just so spiritual and prayerful. That, if you ask any one of my brothers and sisters, that's the first thing that they'll mention to you. And because of the doctrines within the Bible, we picked up other things that he taught us. So the second thing would have been respect and humility. Even Dad himself had so much respect for us, his children, because he felt that in respecting us, he will teach us to respect our elders. And he always taught us that no matter where you go, remain humble and always show respect. So those were some of the main principles that Dad taught us. Yeah.
Tell us about the time after he stopped being president, and there were all these media, court cases. How did that affect you as his child? At what point did you feel like there was negative energy for the family? Personally, on your personal view, at what point did you feel that maybe he was being attacked or just that bad vibe?
To be honest, if I can answer that question candidly or openly, I would say that we got to a certain stage where we knew that no matter what, even whether or not you're president, just on an individual basis, for example, I speak for myself as a person, there will always be people for you and there will always be people against you. But as long as you have the word of God by your side, there's nothing that can break you. And that's what we stood on.
So you never felt...
I mean, as a human being, obviously, you may feel at some point, you may question certain things, but we stayed so prayerful that we left everything to God. So I feel that as long as you leave everything to God, there's nothing impossible with him. Yeah.
Coming to, the time leading up to your father's illness and, the time he passed on, what are some of the things that you would remember, especially during his last days? Maybe conversations with him, before I get to his death, like one of your last conversations with him, what do you remember?
I don't know. I don't know if... I'm not sure if those are the things that I would really share. They're quite personal. Because, I mean, for me, since his passing, it's been, every day is a constant reminder. So it's sometimes it gets a little bit hard to get that personal. But I do remember talking to him about going to university and how excited he was.
How old were you when he died?
How old was I? I should have been about, I was in my early 20s, I think. Yeah, somewhere there. I can't remember exactly because it all happened so, everything just moved like like a whirlwind, and it only kicked in maybe a few months later that he was actually, sometimes I still have to pinch myself, and I think this goes for all my brothers and sisters, because some of the things that Dad loved, for example, reading, as I said earlier, he was an avid reader. Maybe a new political book will come out, or a new book on economics, or any literature, and you look at it and you think, oh wow, let me call that, and then you remember, like, no, that's not around. So it's difficult. It's still difficult. I mean, it doesn't feel like 9 years. It feels like yesterday. Yeah, and just every day is like it's a battle, because there's still so much unfinished business. There's so many other matters that have to be concluded, that haven't been concluded, and so it's like a never-ending race. But as Dad taught us, patience is a virtue, silence is golden, and humility is key. So just keep reading the Bible, just keep hanging on the word of God and just thanking him for the small victories that we have. Yeah.
Are you able to share with us, like on the day that you got the news that your father was no more? Can you remember where you were?
Yes.
Who broke the news and how that made you feel?
I remember very clearly. I was in Kablonga, at my mom's house in Kablonga, and I think it was about 1 or 2 a.m. and one of his bodyguards or security guards came over and knocked on the door, and I went to answer the door, and Mom was just behind me, and she said, and he just broke the news, and I don't think I believed it. I was like, this must be a prank. I think it's a joke, until we actually got to the house, and it still hasn't sunk in. So it's a little bit hard for me to talk about because it's still real every day. Yeah, it's still real every day.
How would you want your father to be remembered? You've told us about how you will remember him, but all in all, how would you like him to be remembered? What would you like him to be remembered for?
I think Dad, when I say Dad, I mean Dad was also a father of the nation. He wasn't just our father. He was a people's person. He loved people, you know, and he was such a great man of God. And he was funny. He was so funny. He had such a great sense of humor. And I mean, there's so many things that I would like to touch on, but I just feel like I would go on and on and on and on and on.
Yes.
But there's so many things about him. He was a character and a half. Like, I remember once, one of my brothers had called me and said to me, "Oh, Verosia, look, listen, I know you're an Arsenal fan, but I'll buy you the entire Liverpool kit if you switch teams, so that there's 2 of us in the family, because the rest of them are Man U." And so I think he snitched on me. I think he snitched, because Dad and I were like the 2 Arsenal fans in the family, and we would watch. In fact, that's where my love for football came from, because I used to watch as a young kid I used to watch with him the British Premier League, and that's the time when West Ham and Aston Villa were doing better than Liverpool and the current top 4, and he would teach me, okay, that's an offside, and that's a free kick, and that's where my passion for football grew. So I think my brother snitched on me and said to him, she's a Liverpool fan now. And so once I was having lunch with him at his Kablonga residence, and then he says, "You know what, Mayo, a little birdie told me that you're now a Liverpool fan." And I looked at him. I had to pause for a while because I knew where he was going with it, but I didn't want to be outsmarted, but I already knew that I was. I mean, because it's Mr. Chiluba. So I was like, "Oh, well, Dad, I don't think I can say much, but that you've caught me. But if you give me your Baliwan jersey, maybe we can talk about this and renegotiate."
Yeah.
So, you know, those little moments there were a lot of them.
Did he give you the Baliwan jersey?
No, he didn't.
Where is it?
No, it's somewhere in the archives. He didn't give me the Baliwan jersey, but I maintained I'm still an avid Liverpool fan, up to date. And my jersey still stands, and the jersey has my brother's name on it, the General, which my dad gave the nickname to Bacastro. And so, yeah, so whenever I wear that jersey, I actually crack up because I remember the moments I shared with Dad about the jersey, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there are a lot of little moments and little things that our various trips abroad, you know, not only were it was just like a holiday, it was more like educational, because he would take us places where we actually learn about other people's cultures and understanding the different ways of life and respecting different religions and chains of thought, which was obviously one of his one of my brothers actually remembers avidly that one of Dad's key principles was education, unity, communication. Because without those things, it becomes hard for you to understand and build relationships with other people. And if you can't build those relationships, then how can you be a leader? So it's one of those things, like our trips to Israel, for example. That's one that I remember very clearly, because he took us to almost all the places in the Bible, you know, all the important places in the Bible. We walked through this, you know, the streets of Jerusalem, and it was really, really eye-opening. At that time, I didn't really understand where I was and what it was, but when I look back at through the pictures, and I then understand why he felt it was important to take us there. Yeah.
Is there anything, obviously you're his daughter and he, you know, bought your stuff and everything, but is there one thing that you have that your father gave you, something, you know, tangible that you can say, you know, this is, I treasure this so much, my dad gave me this and these are the words you say to me, or anything in those lines?
I have a Bible from him. Yes.
Do you have it here in the house?
I actually don't. I only read it at certain times, because when I touch it, I just feel this, I don't know, I have to pray a lot before I pray with that Bible, because I get very emotional with it, so I don't usually bring it out. But that's, most of us have Bibles signed by him. Yeah. In fact, I would say that the majority of us have Bibles from Dad. I mean, yes, he's bought me a lot of things, and you know, but like I say, material things don't last, you know. But for me, most of all, the most tangible things are the things that he left in here. That's what's, and no one can take that away, because he was feeding us bits of his intelligence, bits of his experiences, bits of his understanding of the world. And I think that's the most, I can't touch it, but it exudes through me. So I feel like I'm walking with him every day. And so for me, that's the most important thing.
Now, your father was a very great orator.
Yes.
Is there anyone in the family who has, you know, inherited, or someone who has followed his footsteps? Is there anyone who's a great orator? I know that there's no one who's actively in politics, but...
To be honest, I would say that the majority of us are all well-read and well-spoken. But it just depends in what environment. Because our dad had told us to be humble, you find that the reason why you're asking me that question is because you haven't heard any of them speak. Why is that? It's because of the virtues and the values that our dad taught us. He taught us not to overindulge in trying to be known. Be yourself and be humble. When the time comes, as they say, cometh the man, cometh the hour. When the time comes, make your presence known. And that's why you would ask me that question. Otherwise, if our characters were slightly different, you would have heard them speak. Or my sister Helen she expresses herself brilliantly. I mean, I would have to go through the whole list because they're all well spoken. Bamiko is very well spoken, very well read. He's an avid reader of the Bible. Baotensia is, and I mean, they all have a plethora of, you know, degrees behind them, but they're so humble that you wouldn't even know unless you spoke to them that this is the daughter of the former president or this is a son of the former president. They don't over exude that pompousness. They're not pompous. They're very humble, the lot of them. So if I had to pick out one, I think it would be very unfair.
You spoke about, you know, your father, you know, being this humble man and teaching you to be humble. Did he speak to you about joining politics? I know you were fairly young, but later on in life, you know, did he speak to you about joining politics? especially being a female?
No. No, he didn't. He just, he always taught us to be ourselves. So find out who you are within and be that person. And be the best version of that person. So it's up to you to decide what it is you want to do with your life.
He was literally a Democrat.
Basically, you can put it in those words, yes. But he was very open to, he was very, what's the word I'm looking for? He encouraged us to be ourselves and not to mimic anyone else. Because, you know, when your father is such a great man, you feel that you have to somehow fill those boots, right? You have to be, they say that children should be better versions of their parents. But when you have a mother like mine and a father like mine, two pairs of boots that are extremely difficult to fill, I think the best thing is just to be the best version of yourself. Yeah. So he encouraged my football because I played for the national team at some point here in Zambia. Yes. So he encouraged that.
Why did you stop?
I went to university, which he also encouraged. And so for me, I just want to be, I want to make sure that his legacy lives on and that he's remembered for who he was as an individual and not just as a president.
What legacy do you want your father to be remembered for?
First of all, obviously, you know, his leadership, the fact that he was so prayerful and he put God first in everything, and his humility, his integrity. As you said, he's such a well-spoken man. Yes, so all those things I think are so important, and there are other things that haven't been touched on, but I think we'll leave that for another day.
If you had a chance to, you know, hypothetically speaking, tell your father something today, what would it be?
Thank you.